Well, the character I'd like to look at this morning is Mary Magdalene. Firstly, what does her name mean and where does she come from? So I looked up what Mary meant, and it's a Hebrew name, and the meaning is beloved, bitter, or drop of the sea. Now, these are three completely different meanings, but I think by the time I finished, I think looking through it, I think all these things were part of her name, that were part of her. She was beloved. What she went through was the bitter bit, and at the end, when she was commissioned by Jesus, she was a drop in the sea as the water that would give life to everyone. So that's, I think, it's all in there somewhere. So that's her first name. Then Magdalene, that was not her surname, but it spoke of where she came from. So it's generally interpreted as Magdala, and that's the town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, and it was a major fishing centre. So she grew up by the sea, and her father was probably a fisherman, and so that's where Mary came from. But the first time she's mentioned in the Bible is in Luke 8, verse 2. And certain women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of whom were cast 7 demons. So she had met with Jesus, and this is the first verse that we hear of her in the Bible. She had come and she meets with Jesus. There was a group of ladies there that she was with. They had been healed of various things. It doesn't actually tell us what, but they were healed, and she was delivered of 7 evil spirits. And from this point, she begins to follow Jesus. She had had an amazing encounter with him. And from that moment, she went on with him and followed him. In her village, she would have been probably known as one that had an evil spirit, one that was a bit odd. So people maybe didn't want to have anything to do with her. But when Jesus came and he broke into her world and called her by her true name, Mary. In calling her Mary, she was not tied to the unworthy, unclean, or broken person that the village had seen her as. She now had a new beginning and a change to her story. During Jesus' ministry on earth, Mary and the other women, it doesn't tell us their names, but they helped him in practical ways. I'm sure he had to be fed, and sometimes we sort of read things out of the Bible and we don't really connect with what actually was going on, but Jesus must have been fed, and the disciples, and so these ladies, they travelled with them, and they were able to minister to them practically. Now, the next time we read of Mary, it's in Matthew 27, verse 56. And many women who followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, were there looking on afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Josie, the mother of Zebedee's sons. So she had been watching, she'd followed what was going on, and there she was afar, watching what was happening. I wonder how she felt. Someone that she had travelled with, someone that had made such a difference in her life, and now he was going to be put to death. But she followed and she watched the scene of the cross, but she was afar off looking on. Then when Jesus was put in the tomb, she'd seen him laid in the tomb, and then she had seen him buried. The stone was rolled in front of the cave, and she just sat there. Verse 61, it says, and Mary Magdalene was there, and another Mary sitting opposite the tomb. So after all this had happened, she'd seen what happened to Jesus, and there she sat opposite the tomb. I wonder what she was thinking. I wonder what was going through her mind as she sat and pondered of the things and the scenes that she had seen, the people who had been healed by Jesus, people that he helped, and yet they all turned on him and he was crucified. So we see her sitting there and pondering what had happened. And then I suppose she went home feeling very sad and heartbroken, for the one that had done so much for her now lay dead. In John 20, verse 1, we read, now the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been rolled away from the tomb. So the next morning she gets up and she goes and she wants to visit the tomb, and she takes some ointment with her to anoint the body, and she's wondering how am I going to get in? How, because of this big stone. But when she gets there, the stone has been rolled away. We find Mary heartbroken and weeping as she comes to the tomb, and she looks into the tomb and she sees the two angels. That's not an everyday happening. You know, sometimes we read these stories and, you know, an angel came to visit them. I think if an angel came to visit us, we'd be quite shocked by it all. But they sort of say it as if it's some natural thing. And also, I always think of the tomb being a very sort of quiet place, as you do with a cemetery. But actually, in one of the Gospels, it was written that there was an earthquake. So it wasn't really a quiet place. There'd been an earthquake. The stone had rolled away. Then she comes to the tomb and she's looking in, and then two angels are there. And she says, here we find Mary broken-hearted and weeping. The tomb was empty, and an angel telling her that Jesus was risen. How confusing. You know, she'd just watched this scene. She'd seen him buried. She'd gone the next day. He's not there. There are two angels there. And she was really confused with it all. And then she turns and she wants to know where he is. And she says to the angel, where is it? Where is he? And then she turns round and she sees a man behind her who she thinks is the gardener. And then in John 20:11-18 we read, but Mary stood outside by the tomb weeping, and as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white, sitting one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. Then they said to her, woman, why are you weeping? And she said to them, because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. And when she had said this, she turned round and saw Jesus standing there, and did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, woman, why are you weeping? Who are you seeking? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said to him, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. And Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned to him and said, Rabboni, which is to say, teacher. She knew that voice, that familiar voice that had called her before. She hears again. Her sorrow and sadness was turned to joy. Her despair changed to hope, and she had found her Saviour and Lord again. The one that she had seen crucified, he was now alive, and she had spoken to him. Then he commissions her and sends her in verse 17-18. Jesus said to her, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascended to my Father and your God, and to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord, and that he had spoken these things to her. Go and tell my brethren. Jesus had entrusted her with the most important message of all. He had chosen a woman, because in that day women weren't really listened to, but Jesus chose a woman to go and tell the good news that he was alive, and that she would go and tell the rest of the disciples who were gathered together that Jesus was alive. She went from following Jesus to the first eyewitness of the risen Christ, her faith restored again, because she must have been quite feeling hopeless, and now it had all turned around. Jesus had called her by name, and her faith was restored. She returned to the disciples and tells them the great news that Jesus is alive. Now, what can we learn this morning from the story of Mary, and how can we apply it to our lives? First of all, she was called by name. You know, there's so much in a name. Mary's name was bitter, unworthy, unclean. But when Jesus called her, everything changed. Now again Jesus finds her and calls to her in her sad and broken state. And again in this situation, he changes everything when Jesus speaks and her spirit is lifted and restored. There is so much in a name. You know, this morning, I don't know how everyone feels here, but there is something that your name holds. It could hold many things, many different situations from the past. But when we come to Jesus, he calls us by name and changes everything, restoring us and giving us a new beginning and a joyful future. We've all got a backstory. We've all got things that have gone in our lives that aren't very pleasant. But you know, when Jesus is there, he changes it all. And he can remove those things that hold us and that really, you know, make us sad, because God can lift those things from us and we really can have a joyful future. In Isaiah 43 we read, when God was speaking to Jacob, I have called you by name and you are mine. When we come to Jesus, we are his. When we ask him into our lives, he changes our lives and we belong to him. When God calls us, he doesn't demand. It comes with belonging. Jesus wants us to belong to him. His love was so great that he sent Jesus to the cross. Jesus laid down his life because he loved us and to give us a better life. And when we come to him, we are belonging to him. God calls us with a gentle voice, is either to adopt us into his family or by restoring us. You know, those times when things go wrong, we sometimes slip away, and yet God can bring us back and restore us. Number 2, she served faithfully. After Mary had met Jesus in the beginning, she became a follower and she served. And as we are our family today in God, we are called to serve in the church family, as we work together, helping each other and supporting each other in different situations that we go through. And we serve in different ways. She served faithfully the needs of Jesus and the disciples. And then number 3, she was searching. Mary wanted to know where her Lord had been taken. She wasn't content just to sit and think, oh, he's gone. She went searching for him. We need to search and seek after God this morning. We need to seek and know him, to grow in him, and to find that our identity is in him and our security is in him. When everything in life seems good, God, Jesus is there. And when things go wrong and our lives are turned upside down, God is still there because he loves us this morning. And we know that Jesus is with us in every situation. Number 4, she listened and recognized the voice of Jesus. In Mary's brokenness and heartache, Jesus speaks in that simple, still and gentle voice. And in those times, because she was in a turmoil and yet Jesus was there, in things that happen in our lives, the situations that happen that turn us upside down, you know, Jesus is there. He's always there. And we know that in every situation, he will never leave us. As he meets Mary and her sorrow, so he meets us and speaks into our lives. You know, when we're upset, when we're, I don't know, whatever situation it is, Jesus is there and he speaks into our lives. He guides us and he leads us. And our pain matters to him. It's not the final word, and he uses it for joy and his purpose. You know, when we go through things, sometimes we wonder why we go through things, but I think it's because God brings us through, and in those times we prove him, and then we can see why it's happened in some ways. And the last one, Mary is given a commission to go and tell. We this morning have the same commission. We are told to go and tell people of God's love for them, to spread the good news that Jesus is alive. Jesus was alive back then, and he is still alive this morning. And we serve a God who is risen, a God who is alive. When we have an encounter with Jesus, and when we meet Jesus, and we know how he has affected our lives and how he makes our lives really good because he's with us, when we have that encounter, we then want to tell other people. We want to share with others that God loves them as he loves us. My desire in my heart is that people would know Jesus how I know him, that they might have that confidence in him that he is forever with you and he loves you whatever. We are ambassadors for Christ on earth. Our stories are important. Each one of us have a story this morning, and it's important. And God has come and changed our lives. We want to share that, and it makes our faith stronger too as we share and as we tell of our experiences. You know, it's not a performance this morning. It's an overflow in knowing Jesus. That overflow within, when we're filled with his Holy Spirit, that we want to tell others and we want to overflow into the community. So this morning, I hope I was ready to go on more then. So I hope you got something out of that. I thoroughly enjoyed getting it together because, God is so good, and I'm just, so good. Anyway, I'll stop.